Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Please be seated, please. Can we take a... No, we don't have a gavel here. Good morning, everyone. I would like to invite the speakers to join the podium, if there are any sitting in the... Okay. Happy New Year, first of all. So it is the first event of the new year. Wishing you the best for 2024. And I hope 2024 would be much better than the previous years, particularly 2023. Welcome to the regional meeting for Asia and the Pacific on the International Decade for People of African Descent. This meeting is organized by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in accordance with the General Assembly Resolution 3916 with a view to raise awareness about the International Decade and its program of activities. The meeting will be held in line with the rules and procedures of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. It is organized in hybrid format, allowing in-person and online participation. The General Assembly appointed the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights as coordinator of the International Decade to follow up on the implementation of the program of activities. The regional meetings directly contribute to these efforts. As many of you know, this is the fifth and final regional meeting on the International Decade, the first one for Latin America and the Caribbean region took place in Brasilia in 2015. The second one for Europe, North America, and Central Asia was held in Geneva in 2017. The third one for Africa took place in Dakar in 2029. And the fourth one for the Middle East region took place in Geneva in 2022. This meeting, the meeting of today, is meant to bring together government, national human rights institutions, civil society organizations, as well as academia and experts from Asia and the Pacific region, particularly people of African descent. We look forward to an enriching discussion over the next 2 days around the three pillars of the International Decade: recognition, justice, and development. As guided by the United Nations General Assembly, the regional meeting will be aimed at strengthening national, regional, and international cooperation and facilitating the exchange of good practices, while also promoting a greater knowledge of and respect for the diverse heritage and culture of African and people of African descent in Asia and the Pacific. Allow me now to invite Mr. Volker Türk, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, for a welcome address. Dear High Commissioner, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, and it's indeed great to start the new year with this particular event, the regional event that actually looks and combines and interconnects two continents that are neighbors, the African continent and the Asia-Pacific continent. And very happy to be here and to open this event at the beginning of the year, especially as you were saying, when we all need to reinforce our commitment to bridging divides and to overcome divisions and to overcome polarizations. It's so important that we actually look at various issues, including particularly the one that is related to the International Decade for People of African descent in the specific region of Asia Pacific. We know that eradicating racism and racial discrimination against Africans and people of African descent is essential and indeed long overdue. For individuals, it means ending the marginalization and the unequal access to rights and basic services that can result from that marginalization. And we often see this play out when it comes to employment, access to adequate housing, healthcare, and so forth. But we also know that racism and racial discrimination have an impact on society as a whole, depriving the society of its full skills, of its talents, and the contributions of all of its members. Recognizing the equal rights of all members of society, regardless of sex, race, ethnicity, any other characteristic, is an immensely powerful lever that advances social harmony, increases shared and sustainable prosperity, but also renews greater trust in institutions. It is also the most effective way to build societies that are inclusive and respectful of everyone. Historically, we know that Africans have lived in the Asia-Pacific region since at least the 7th century, as merchants, as explorers, as students, as soldiers, but also as victims of enslavement. Across the centuries, many African communities have taken root, and they continue to contribute immensely to the vigor, diversity, and prosperity of societies in the region. Today, the Siddhis in India, the Shedis in Pakistan, and the Kafirs in Sri Lanka are among the largest of these historic communities of African descent. Yet, like the more recent arrivals from Africa or of African descent, face widespread racial discrimination. Reports by my office, by the various human rights mechanisms and other bodies, have pinpointed serious human rights concerns in several countries of the region, which include discrimination, hate crimes, hate speech, racial profiling by law enforcement officers, as well as specific concerns about the rights of African asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants. While other regions share these issues, pervasive racial prejudice feeds a sense that people of African descent are not full and legitimate members of Asian and Pacific societies. In part, this is the result of the legacies of colonialism and enslavement, which, as some countries in the Asia-Pacific region know from bitter experience, were built on toxic notions of racial supremacy that continue to reverberate in the lives of millions of people today. There is also experience in the Asia-Pacific regions of similar patterns of descent-based discrimination against other marginalized communities, particularly on the basis of caste, as well as against indigenous peoples. These divisions and injustices need to be overcome for the good of everyone, and I think the 21st century cannot afford to have this continued marginalization and discrimination. Together with the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, we have a member here with us, the Durban Declaration and the Programme of Action, the International Decade for People of African Descent, we have very strong frameworks that are concrete and action-oriented that help states realize their core human rights commitments. This meeting is really an opportunity to discuss specific but also practical measures by states, but also by other actors within society, towards a greater recognition, towards justice and development for people of African descent, and to identify avenues for strengthened national, regional, and international cooperation. Critically, it also provides a space to listen to the voices of Africans and people of African descent in the Asia-Pacific region, to consider their concerns, to listen to their concerns, to listen and meaningfully embrace their recommendations, and to celebrate their histories and contributions to the development of their societies. Let me note some of the measures that I invite you to consider. First, ratification and full implementation of the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination is particularly important. I urge every country to adopt and apply anti-discrimination and comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation, and in particular to ensure that the data that are collected are disaggregated by race, among other grounds. We cannot fix what we do not see. Participation by people of African descent themselves is crucial to ensure the effectiveness of this work. National human rights institutions and regional mechanisms, such as the ASEAN bodies, can also contribute greatly to these efforts. It is vital to ensure that people of African descent, and that's the second very important point, have equal access to justice and are treated by law enforcement officials in accordance with international human rights standards. I invite states to take decisive steps to dismantle systemic racism and achieve reparatory justice, as set out in my office's 4-point agenda towards transformative change for racial justice and equality. I also encourage governments to promote greater recognition of the achievements of people of African descent, including the distinctive influence of their communities in shaping political, cultural, and intellectual aspects of society in several countries of the region. These facts can be disseminated through school curricula and textbooks, the media, museums, and throughout public life. Working to end racism and racial discrimination are core goals for my office and for me personally. As coordinator of the International Decade, we work intensely in close cooperation with states, national human rights institutions, and civil society, among others, to develop practical guidance and campaigns that can immediately be implemented on the ground for maximum impact. And we really want to emphasize in particular the campaign side, because we know how important it is to counter some of the narratives that we see, especially on social media platforms. We are open, my office is open to working with all stakeholders in all countries to contribute to their efforts to establish full equality for every member of society. This includes advice and support to governments for the development of laws, nationwide action plans, and the establishment of national human rights institutions and equality bodies. Our fellowship program for people of African descent has been very positive, bringing in new and important perspective, and it has advanced the International Decade by strengthening capacities of activists and human rights defenders, which really cross-cuts different regions and brings forward the synergies of experiences of different continents. In fact, I met with them last year, the ones who came in 2023, and it was very, very important meeting for me, because it also showed how important we have and what contributions they can make as fellows, not just for our own work, but also when they go back to their countries. In fact, tomorrow you will hear from 10 former fellows from Asia Pacific about their experiences, but also their recommendations for action. I welcome the Human Rights 75 pledges that have been made by several states from the region last year. Many of them will contribute directly to progress in eradicating discrimination, and my office is very keen to follow up on the different pledges that were made during the high-level event on the 11th and 12th December. To further these goals and to assist in implementing the pledges, I urge you to deepen your dialogues with my office, but also with the UN anti-racism mechanisms, including the recently established Permanent Forum on People of African Descent and International Independent Expert Mechanism to advance racial justice and equality in law enforcement. It's a mechanism that has already gone to different countries. It's really an important one and has made very key recommendations by analyzing especially what is happening in the area of law enforcement And I think it's really key that this mechanism is used. We have entered the final year of the International Decade for People of African Descent, and it's already clear that this work is far from over. It is essential that efforts towards recognition, justice, and development for people of African descent be pursued vigorously beyond 2024. I encourage you to contribute to the draft UN Declaration on the Promotion and Full Respect of Human Rights of People of African Descent and the elaboration of complementary standards to the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. And I also encourage states to consider a second International Decade for People of African Descent starting in 2025. Thank you very much.
We can excuse you. Thank you, High Commissioner, for your stimulating words. I will now give the floor to Her Excellency, Ms. Seongmee Yoon, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea, who will be delivering a statement on behalf of the Asia-Pacific Group. Ms. Yoon, you have the floor.
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of Korea is honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the members of the Asia-Pacific Group. We thank the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for their extensive work in preparing this event. We would also like to express our gratitude for the panelists who came all the way to Geneva to share their valuable experiences and insights. Our thanks also go to the High Commissioner for his warm and enlightening remarks, and we look forward to the discussions that will take place in the coming 2 days on this important topic. Distinguished colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, combating racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance is a crucial element in upholding human dignity and enjoyment by everyone of the full range of human rights without discrimination of any kind. It also serves as an important foundation for peaceful, inclusive, and harmonious societies that respect cultural, racial, and religious diversity. The Sustainable Development Goals, in particular Goals 10 and 16, contain targets on empowering social, economic, and political inclusion for all, as well as ensuring equal access to justice and inclusive participatory and representative decision-making at all levels. In this regard, the elimination of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance can contribute to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. As an important part of the fight against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, the international community consistently demonstrated its commitment to promoting respect, protection, and fulfillment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms of people of African descent. In 2013, the UN, through its General Assembly Resolution 68/237, designated 2015 to 2024 as the International Decade for People of African Descent. The OHCHR has been engaged in many activities aimed at raising awareness and sharing experiences and best practices, including the regional meetings it has held since 2015. However, despite years of effort, there remains more to be done to ensure full enjoyment of human rights of people of African descent and enhance understanding of various aspects of this issue. As the decade draws into a close this year, the international community needs to step up efforts to come to a better understanding of the diverse heritage, culture, and contributions to society of people of African descent in various regions around the world, and work together to gain wisdom and insight on ways to fully realize their human rights. As the final installment among the 5 regional meetings organized by the OHCHR under the Program of Activities for the Implementation of the International Decade for People of African Descent, this meeting provides a unique opportunity to enhance such understanding in Asia and the Pacific region. It brings together various stakeholders, including states, civil society, and academia, allowing them to present their diverse perspectives and best practices. We sincerely hope for a constructive discussion amongst these stakeholders on how to deal with the issue to address the challenges of racism and racial discrimination in the region, as well as to gain insights on building more harmonious and inclusive societies which ensure the enjoyment by everyone of their full range of human rights. Distinguished colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by expressing again our gratitude to the OHCHR for their immense efforts preparing this event. I hope for fruitful discussions to take place in the coming days. Thank you.
Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellency, Mr. Volker Türk, High Commissioner for Human Rights and UN Human Rights Office, Honorable Representative of the Asia-Pacific Group of the Member State of the Human Rights Council, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I am speaking here on behalf of the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, and as you may be aware that back then in 1955, Bandung Conference held in Indonesia represent a watershed movement in the history of Afro-Asian relations, organized by a small group of prime ministers, that time Muhammad Ali, Pakistan, Jawaharlal Nehru, India, UNU, Burma, John Kotewala, Sri Lanka or Ceylon that time, and Ali Sastrawamidjojo, Indonesia. The conference brought together representatives from the 29 developing countries and non-allied nations. The core principle of the conference include human rights, sovereignty, non-discrimination, third world solidarity, mutual respect, and political self-determination. It functions as a critical site for those leaders to promote Afro-Asian solidarity, agitated for the end of colonialism, and ultimately blazed a path toward liberation and independence. The 1955 conference ultimately served as the catalyst for a non-aligned movement as of today, laying the ideology groundwork for the subsequent conferences, including non-aligned conference held in Belgrade later on in '61. Now, allow me to talk about the ASEAN. The ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights was established in 2012 and is an Asian charter body, the ASEAN charter body. In the last 12 months, ICHA has held 17 activities of the approved priority program and activities of ICHA, which emphasizing the realization of ICHA mandate in relation to the standard setting on human rights, policy support to ASEAN sectoral body and the ASEAN member states. We are 10 in ASEAN, and soon we will be 11 with the joining of Timor-Leste the newly independent country in our region, as well as on development of human rights strategy, engagement with stakeholders on issues related to trafficking of persons, especially women and children, freedom of religion and belief, the belief of person, the right of person with disability, the right of the child, climate change, environmental right, human rights concern in the post-pandemic situation, COVID post-pandemic situation, business and human rights, the right of victims in the prevention and countering violent extremism, and the prevention of torture, among others. And these, of course, include the non-discrimination principle of race, of age, of gender, etc. ICHA will continue to support the chair agenda for 2024, and this year it falls into the chairmanship of Laos, my country. And the theme of this year is enhancing ASEAN, enhancing connectivity and resilience, particularly on realizing the ASEAN that is significant, important, and relevant. In this connection, ICHA has been putting effort to ensure that its work is relevant to the life of the peoples, regional interests, and the world concern. ICHA has reached out to ASEAN entities such as the ASEAN Institute of Peace and Reconciliation, the stakeholders to include civil society organizations, CSOs, national human rights institutions, young people, children, to listen and consult them on matters related to promotion and protection of human rights, including the non-discrimination principle. ICHA also involved in general public and young people on the occasion of commemorating the 10th anniversary of the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration and the Phnom Penh statement on the adoption of the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration through an easy essay competition on the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. We are happy to report that ICHA has been actively engaging with ASEAN sectoral bodies such as the Senior Officials Meeting on Transnational Crime, the ASEAN Commission on the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Women and Children, ACWC, and ASEAN Committee on the Implementation of the ASEAN Declaration on the Protection of the Rights of Migrant Workers. Senior Officials Meeting responsible for the information summary, the Senior Officials Meeting on Social Welfare and Development, and the ASEAN Committee on Women's, the Senior Officials Meeting on Economic, Soommer, and the ASEAN University Network. ICHA has also provided advice in mainstreaming human rights, integrating human rights as the principal means and an end to the programming and approaches in their work, such as in the development of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework after the COVID recovery, the Bohol Trafficking in Person Work Plan 2017 to 2020, the work plan on the ASEAN Plan of Action to prevent and counter the rise of radicalism and violent extremism from 2019 to 2025, and the ASEAN Roadmap on the elimination of worst form of child labor by 2025. Furthermore, ASEAN has contributed, ICHA, has contributed to the development of the ASEAN Declaration on the Protection of Migrant Workers, and this including those who are from the African descent, and their family member in crisis situation. The ASEAN Declaration on the Placement and Protection of Migrant Fishers, the ASEAN Guideline on the Implementation of the Regional Plan of Action for the Protection of Children from all forms of online exploitation and abuse, and the whole trafficking in person work plan from 2022 to 2027. ICHA also engaged by the ASEAN member country by hosting ASEAN Human Rights Dialogue in 2022, last year. The ASEAN Human Rights Dialogue has provided a forum for ASEAN member states to exchange views and concerns on human rights issues, including the principle of non-discrimination based on race, on gender, on age, on the social strata, and concern issues in the region in a genuine manner in hope of forging a regional human rights cooperation throughout the region and beyond. In addition, ICHA also continues to maintain good relations with dialogue partners and the United Nations through a series of activities, interface meetings, and discussion on human rights. In October 2022, ICHA hosted the fourth ASEAN-EU dialogue, policy dialogue on human rights. And we have reached to many points of agreement to be implemented together between ASEAN and EU in the future, in the years to come. In realizing the Articles 4.2 of its TOR, the term of reference, in developing a regional human rights framework based on the human rights, ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, ICHA has begun the process of drafting ASEAN framework on environmental rights. And this is also very factual because this is the point of concern of many stakeholders and states in the region. This measure is in line with the Articles 28 of the ASEAN Declaration on Human Rights on the right to a safe, clean, and sustainable environment. It is expected that the framework to be finalized by this year, 2024, and the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and the 30th anniversary of the Vienna Declaration and the Plan of Action have been commemorated in 2023, last year. On this occasion, ICHA takes stock on its progress, challenges, and limitations in the last 13 years since its inception. The establishment of ICHA is not only the realization of the ASEAN Declaration on Human Rights, but also the fulfillment of the ASEAN commitment to implement the International Human Rights Instrument through the adoption of the number of regional human rights norms and its mainstream effort in regional initiative. ICHA has become the leading mechanism for human rights in Southeast Asia and in ASEAN. Nevertheless, this progress is not without challenges. The future challenges on human rights will be more complex, and the ability of ICHA to adapt and respond to the issues is needed. For instance, while this digital transformation brings a lot of advantage to the life of people, it also comes up with the dark side of it, which include the use of technology in trafficking of persons, online bullying and harassment, hate speech online, cybercrime, disinformation, to name a few. And I am sure that you are all concerned by those issues I mentioned. The ability to respond to the future challenge that ICHA strengthen its role in contributing to the development of human rights strategy in ASEAN, particularly in the area of providing remedies and to better responding to the need of the rights of those peoples who have been victimized by the incidents of human rights violation. These include those victims of discrimination and stigmatization. We have to take care of all those victims in order to protect everybody, not to cite only the African descent, but everybody we have to cover. I would also like to reiterate that ICHA, under the chairmanship of Laos, the LAPDR, my country, we will double our effort in fulfilling our commitment and dedication toward the promotion, the protection of human rights for the ASEAN region and promoting prosperity for our peoples. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador. We will now listen to the statement of Dr. Yoon Soomer, Chair Designate of the United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, through a pre-recorded video.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the members of the United Nations Permanent Forum and People of African Descent, I am pleased to greet you all at this important regional meeting for the Asia and the Pacific region on the International Decade for People of African Descent. The history and contributions of African descent in the Asia-Pacific region has yet to receive the ample recognition it deserves. People of African descent in the region have been victims of enslavement and colonialism and continue to face racism and racial discrimination, while also being among those left farthest behind in development agendas. It is through a meeting such as this that we express hope that greater light is shed on the human rights concerns of people of African descent and enable recommendations that consolidate claims for better protection and promotion of these human rights. I understand that this is the last regional meeting of the International Decade, and therefore it is timely that we also avail ourselves of the opportunity to discuss what has been achieved so far in the past 10 years of the campaign. As you may know, the program of activities for the implementation of the International Decade for the People of African Descent envisaged the establishment of, and I quote, a forum to serve as a consultation mechanism, unquote. In that case, the permanent forum was also one of the outcomes of the International Decade. The Permanent Forum, as an advisory body to the Human Rights Council and a consultative mechanism for people of African descent globally, is mandated to monitor and review progress on the effective implementation of the program of activities of the International Decade for people of African descent. Since our operationalization in 2022, we have held our first 2 public sessions with the wide participation of people of African descent from around the world, resulting in many thematic discussions on issues concerning people of African descent, ultimately linking them to the 3 pillars of the International Decade, namely recognition, justice, and development. As an outcome of the discussions, our report of the first two sessions, which we submitted last summer to the United Nations General Assembly and the Human Rights Council, recommends an extension of the International Decade for People of African Descent to a second decade for the period 2025 to 2034, with a view to taking further actions to bring about the full recognition of and justice and development for people of African descent. Specifically, we recommended that the second International Decade for People of African Descent focus on reparatory justice, recognition, and equity, and address systemic and structural racial discrimination at the local, national, regional, and global levels. I also take the opportunity to inform you that the third session of the Permanent Forum will take place in Geneva, Switzerland, from the 16th to the 19th of April this year, and we will be discussing, among a number of thematic issues, the expectations and challenges in implementing a second international decade for people of African descent. My colleague and fellow member of the Permanent Forum, Mr. Wang, is with you in person and will be closely following the deliberations you will be having. We trust that his contributions will add value to your reflections. Let me wish you all success for an impact-oriented outcome of the meeting. Thank you kindly for your invitation and for your attention. Excellencies, distinguished guests.
Thank you, Dr. Yoon. And I will now give the floor to Honorable Ayor Makur Chuot. Honorable Ayor Makur Chuot is currently member of the Legislative Council of the 41st Parliament of Western Australia, making her first woman of African descent to occupy a seat in the Western Australia Parliament. Ms. Chuot, you have the floor. So while we try to sort out the technical issue, I would like to make an announcement that Her Excellency Ambassador Khadra Ahmed Hassan, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Djibouti to the United Nations in Geneva and chairperson of the ad hoc committee on the elaboration of complementary standards, has kindly agreed to serve in the role of the rapporteur for this regional meeting. I kindly invite her to come to the podium. Thank you, Ambassador. Allow me now to proceed to the adoption of the program of work. As in the four previous regional meetings, the program is built on the three pillars of the decade, allowing us to reflect upon the themes of recognition, justice, and development from the perspective of the Asia and the Pacific region. I propose the adoption of the program of the meeting. Any objection? Any objection online? Those participating? So, as I do not see any objection, I declare the program of work adopted. I now invite delegates from participating states of Asia and the Pacific region to make general comment. You have 2 minutes. I would like to request you to keep your statement brief. I also would like to remind delegates to send your written statement at the email address that you can see on the screen. Who wants to take the floor? Shaina. So I see Shaina requesting for the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues. This is the first time that a regional meeting on the international descent for people of African descent being held among Asian Pacific region. And we believe this meeting will play a key role in promoting and protecting the human rights of African people and the people of African descent, and combating racism and racial discrimination in the next decade. China attached great importance to the cause of protection of the human rights of Africans and the people of African descent, and has participated constructively in the consultation on all of the relevant
Recording in progress.
United Nations resolutions. We wish the regional meeting every success. Mr. Chair, colonials, slaveries, and the transatlantic slave trade were dark moments in the history of humankind that affiliate the people of Africa. Regrettably, racism and racial discriminations and intolerance has not eradicated to this day. The restructuring of systematic racism and hate crimes against the people of African descent in a number of countries continues a serious violation of human rights and the fundamental freedom of African people. Countries with serious problems of this racism and racial discriminations should examine their own problems in a serious manner, take practical actions to rectify their mistakes, speed up the implementation of the Durban Declaration of a Program of Action, create an equal and inclusive environment for minorities such as African descent, and eliminate the breeding ground for hatred and discrimination. China supports the extension of the international decades of the people of African descent and is willing to work with all parties to build a world of equality and freedom from discrimination for all. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, distinguished delegates of China. Any other delegates who would like to take the floor?
My video is working now.
Okay. So now we have, oh, sorry. Let's listen first to Honorable Chuot, and I will come back to you, Madam. Thank you. Please, you have the floor.
I'm very sorry. I don't know what was happening there. Good morning, everybody. It is a great honor to be with all of you. I will begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I am in today, the Wajak people of Noongar Nation. Pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. Thank you, Mr. Yuru Bushinku, Chief Anti-Racial Discrimination Section, Office of the Commissioner for Human Rights, for inviting me to speak at the regional meeting for the Asia and the Pacific region on the International Decade for the People of the African Descent, with the theme of recognition, justice, and development. Referring to my lived experiences, can I acknowledge all the participants today? I can't mention all of you by names, but thank you for being a part of this great cause for our community. Greatest thanks to the United Nations for all the support you give to the world's most vulnerable people, refugees like myself and my family. I was born in an Ethiopian refugee camp. My parents having fled to the turmoil of our homeland. We returned to South Sudan when I was 2. There, my father was killed during the civil war for independence. We fled again this time to Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, where I spent 10 years of my life. I arrived in Western Australia on a humanitarian visa in 2005. I was 15 with my mother and siblings. I felt like I had arrived to another planet when we came to Australia because that was my first bigger flight. Everything was so different. I spoke very little English, just basic. In 2021, I was elected to Western Australian Legislative Council. I am the first woman of the African descent and the first person from the South Sudanese background to sit in any state parliament in Australia. More than 80,000 Western Australians were born in Africa, and their positive influence can be felt across the state, socially, culturally, and economically. In the 2020 census, over 400,000 people living in Australia recorded they were of African origin, representing 1.6% of the Australian population and 5.1% of the Australians' overseas-born population. Most 58% are white South Africans, but 42% are Black Africans from the sub-Saharan countries. Challenges faced by the people of the African descent living in Australia, including social inclusion issues, new languages, cultural norms, laws, rules, and a society that is more individualistic than Africa. In Africa, we're very community-oriented. Difficulty finding certifying work and housing is what I hear every day as a member of parliament. Education and training are the key to social integration. My work as a member of parliament directs people to networks, services, and opportunities. Before politics, I was an international model and an accountant, and learned the power of visibility. Recognition develops a sense of identity and belonging, positively impacting communities. I was the first African Black model in Western Australia to grace runways and magazines many years ago, which I brought pride to my community. They saw themselves represented. After modeling, I ran an agency to develop and promoted young African women in the fashion industry. Today, there are many more examples of women of color in the fashion industry and in media in Australia. In this way, I was identified as a community leader and entered parliament. I took on the role because representation matters the most. See her and be her. My election is recognition that the public believe the African perspective is relevant to the modern Australia. I speak often, widely to all kinds of audience, and this recognition of the African experiences in public spaces has inspired others to take up political membership, volunteering, and employment. Some for the first time, like recently Councillor Evia Aringo, who was elected for the city of Swan in October 2023. Now, like me, she shares her story with the audience. There are numerous of multicultural festivals, including African communities events every year in WA that are well attended. Last year, 35,000 African countries were 35 African countries were celebrated at the popular Jumbo Africa, organized by the Organization of the African Communities. It attracted more than 20,000 people and supported by our government, the state government, by 105,000. The WA Police and the Community Engagement Division are committed to positive engagement with culturally and linguistically diverse communities, including the African communities and youth, in inviting people from the core background of the police, a community engagement representative from the police department, which often deal with cultural appropriate issues, many of them often cultural events. Through COVID-19, the state's Labour government involved CAL community leaders, including the African community leaders, in the management and the messaging of the virus. Since refugee and immigrant households are significant, statistically bigger, multi-generational, and in essential work like healthcare, African leaders were officially acknowledged by the governor for the significant part they played in the excellent health, economy, and social outcomes that Western Australia achieved. In 2021, Mr. Sham Madongdo, legal research officer, initiated a conference of district court judges, which I was invited to the conference as a keynote speaker. I spoke to the receptive audience about the issues affecting the litigants from the African backgrounds in Western Australia, sharing the insight, concerns, and recommendations directly from the African community. One of the things that I mentioned as on my speech was racial profiling, cultural and language misunderstanding, barriers to education, training and employment, and mental health is one of the things that I mentioned, changing family structure and youth. The organization of the African community in Western Australia is also making a significant impact on young people of the African descent, receiving sponsorship through government and community organization, and is partnership with the Western Australian Department of Justice, Children Courts, Juvenile Justice, Department of Child Protection, police and schools, and in around Perth. I highlighted this cultural appropriate mentoring program in Western Australian Parliament following the tragic death of Ayor Chol Riak in Melbourne to the youth violence. In 2021, I supported a motion that recognized the success of the Goldfield Immigrant Program, which I believe if we increase many of these programs, there will be an effective change in the society. This initiative provides a job readiness, employment connection, assistance in relocation, and settlement for immigrants with refugee backgrounds, attracting attention of the African community in Western Australia. Clients come from 35 African countries, 35 countries, 18 are African countries. In 2022, I recognized a successful May Day roundtable event in celebration of women making change happen. 80 women from the African background attended this. 5 remarkable women in the government leaders shared they overcome numerous of barriers to arrive to the table of big decisions. Power, social, and justice community and leadership were discussed. I'm proud to be a member of Parliamentary Friends of Africa in Parliament. Recently, in 2023, we have hosted our Parliamentary Friends of Africa and the Parliamentary Friends of Refugee. Last year, we were able to raise awareness about the barriers to education faced by refugees, and the Labour government extended to study and work rights for the refugees and bridging visas holders who have applied for permanent protection visas, giving them access to free and low fee type courses. In conclusion, Australia is committed to addressing and eliminating racial discrimination in all its forms and acknowledges that the racism, including racism against people of the African descent, remains. In 2022, the Australian government provided funding of 7.5 million for over 4 years to the Australian Human Rights Commission to develop a national anti-racism strategy, providing a coordinated shared vision to address racism and promote racial equality in Australia. The government is also announced the multicultural framework, which I'm hopeful that some great outcome will come out of it, because the framework review is being done with the community groups. We had some of the workers who arrived to Perth here and consult with the community groups to talk about the issues that they're facing in the community. So the multicultural framework can be looked at again. So thank you once again, and I apologize for the network issues or whatever that was happening. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chuot. Now I'm asking again if any delegates would like to take the floor before I pass on the floor to members of the national human rights institutions, civil society, academia, and others to deliver a statement. Now I do not see any request for the floor. So, Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank everyone here today. Can you hear me?
It would be great to introduce yourself and.
Yes.
Yep.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we meet on here today. I'm not sure who they are, but in Australia we acknowledge First Nations people. My name's Wazakam Imelda Davis, and I am one of the first black women on the City of Sydney Council in its 180 years of existence. I'd like to thank our Asian families for acknowledging that there are challenges in the Asia Pacific, Mr. Yong, and my brother from China here who spoke about the need for addressing the systemic racism and the challenges, especially in the Asia Pacific. When we're addressing those challenges in Asia Pacific, I'd like my brothers to consider our Pacific nations. Our Timor-Leste and Vanuatu nations are being recruited now for seasonal work in Australia, and I'll be talking a bit more tomorrow. I have the privilege of presenting, but I'd just like to acknowledge all the hard work and the leaders in the room today, but let's think about commonality and how we can work better together. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you. Who would like to take the floor? Our member of the Permanent Forum, Mr. Juan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm Hongjiang Huang, a member of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. It's my honor to attend this regional meeting on people of African descent for Asia and the Pacific region. We know that is His Excellency, the High Commissioner just mentioned that this is the last year of the decade, and it ends at the end of this year. So I am inspired by his speech that we call on member states to consider, to take positive consideration on the extension of the second decade. Ladies and gentlemen, and actually 3 words came to me, or 3 C's and 3 D's come to me after listening to the statements by also including my Chinese colleague. 3C, I think the first one will be political commitment, and I think member states and all stakeholders should renew our commitment to safeguard the safety and livelihoods of people of African descent across the world. Also, to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related injustice without delay. And the second C, I think, would be cooperation, because no one can tackle this challenge alone. So the member states, stakeholders, CSOs, academia, and also UN system and regional organizations need to work together, need to join hands to push, including raise awareness, include promoting legal framework in the member states, including the extension of the second decade, the decade for the people of African descent. And the third C, I think, will be the community of shared future for all, because we are on the same planet and we are facing all those different challenges required our consciousness and also our faithfulness to tackle those challenges. And the 3 Ds, I think, would be sure, the first one, the decade, as mentioned by His Excellency the High Commissioner, and I think this can be done as quick, I think, before the end of this year, so that from next year we will have the second decade for people of African descent from 2025 to 2034. And the second D, I think, will be a declaration. That is what has been mentioned by the chair designate for the Permanent Forum. And actually, the International Intergovernmental Working Group has been pioneering in the discussion about this draft. And I hope that member states and other stakeholders can make contribution to a smooth elaboration of this draft UN declaration for the promotion, protection, and fulfillment of human rights for people of African descent. And the third D, I think that would be development. And this is also very important, because without development, how can we ensure the rights of people of African descent? That means empowerment either in economic, culture, social, as well as civil and political rights. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Juan. I would like also to ask participants online to raise their hand, and you will be given the floor. Anyone online who would like to take the floor? I see none. Anyone in the room? So, if there is no one, oh, sorry, please, yeah.
Mr. Chairperson, Your Excellencies and distinguished colleagues, it is an honor to address this assembly. I am Orlando Chair, a UN fellow and cultural anthropologist specialized in identity negotiations of people of African descent in Asia, specifically in Japan, Thailand, and Australia. I have advocated for and organized grassroots campaigns for the decade in Thailand, Japan, and Australia. The central challenge of people of African descent in Asia Pacific is the question of recognition. Are there people of African descent in Asia Pacific region? Let there be no question about the presence of people of African descent in the Asia Pacific region, because they are. We are an integral part of the region which has, over the last decade, made progress on promoting the recognition, diversity, inclusion, and multiculturalism with relation to people of African descent. We must acknowledge that, especially in states like Australia and Japan. However, despite the progress made in terms of gradual recognition of the contributions and presence of people of African descent, especially in these states, more could be done by states and civil society in this region to promote the ideals of the decade, especially on the themes of justice and the recognition of people of African descent. You see, the fact that we are having this meeting in Geneva, in the continent of Europe, far away from the realities of Asia Pacific region, is itself a salient testament to the challenges of recognition, inclusion, and diversity faced by people of African descent across the region. We respect the ancient cultures and identity of the region, and we are mindful of the need to take into context the historical and cultural dynamics of states in the region. However, I urge states and civil societies in the region to prioritize the fight against racism, racial profiling, stereotypes, xenophobia, and discrimination, which disproportionately affect people of African descent. Thank you.
Thank you. You forgot to introduce yourself. We do not know who you are. Please go ahead.
I am Orlando Chia. I'm from Japan, also from Australia too, and I am a cultural anthropologist, a cultural consultant and researcher. Thank you. A UN fellow too, a United Nations fellow of people of African descent. Thank you.
Okay, good to have you here. So, thank you very much. I've seen none online, so I would like just to invite all the participants to send a written statement to the Secretariat. Once again, the email is on the screen. So, thank you, everyone. As it is almost 10, I declare the opening session closed. We close a little bit in advance, so we have 8 minutes. If everyone would like to just walk around and have some coffee, please do, before we resume at 10. Thank you very much.